my fellow writing addicts, it's Marissa, and clearly I am so ready for Halloween, even though I'm a few days early, but that's okay, because Keo and I are quite ready for the season, isn't that right, my little shark? Because you bite everything. He hates this so much, and I'm so happy. Alright, be free. Go stock some waters. Anyway, today we are talking about how to write a good villain. Because let's be real, the most memorable villains are the worst of the worst, but in the bestest of ways. We all remember Joffrey and other people that I don't remember, like Light. Sorry, just when you think of villains, I think of Joffrey because I like watching that compilation when he gets smacked. So you might be wondering, what's the difference between a villain and an antagonist? Which is a great question. An antagonist is a person who opposes the protagonist in some way. Like if you and him and the antagonist want the same job, he's going to find ways to undermine him. Or she, I don't know, fucking genders. But a villain is inherently bad or evil, and their morals and motives are important to the plot. So there's a key difference. Every villain is an antagonist, but not every antagonist is a villain. Just something for you to remember. Now, if you've been here a while, you'll know that I'm going to start talking about what not to do. Because out of everything, I think that's super important, just having the back of your mind of like, no, don't do that. And the first thing is quite common. Your villain should not be evil just to be evil. Not only is it boring, because it's no fucking fun, it also is so shallow, if it was a puddle and I stood in it, my foot wouldn't even get wet. So yeah, don't do that. Also, don't make your villains shocking just to be shocking. As my cat loves to disturb my set, but hey, it's what we work with. Also, make sure that your villain has a motive or has a non-confusing motive. I'm looking at you, the villain from the first Sword Online. I think his name's Kayaba Akihiko. I think that's his name. I'm trying to remember it from the abridged. But don't be him, where he literally forgets his own motivation. What the fuck? Next thing, make sure your villain isn't a fool or a bumbler, unless it's supposed to be a comedy, like in Phineas and Ferb. Evil Incorporated! Even then, he's not really a villain for the kids. Anyway, but you know what I mean. Your villain should be on par or seem greater as an actual fucking threat to your protagonist, because if they're not, then what's the fucking point? Duh. Next thing, make sure they're not mentally ill. And here's the thing, you can have a mentally ill character, you can have a mentally ill villain. The reason I say maybe not is because typically what ends up happening is you vilify the mental illness that you are portraying, because typically that's the only portrayal we see of it. If your villain is like schizophrenic or bipolar, then it makes people who are those types of disorders feel bad. They're like, am I a villain? Am I something wrong? Am I a threat to society? And you're actually damaging people like that. In the same vein, don't make your villain the only gay character, because fuck you! That makes gay people look like villains! So yeah, extreme fuck you, especially if you do both, oh god. But yeah, no, if you're gonna have a gay villain, and you can, make sure there's another good gay representation on the good side to be like, not all lesbians are evil. Of course, one thing to watch out is making sure the villain doesn't take over the novel. And this is essentially, you put all this time and effort into this villain, and you give like 5% of that energy to your main protagonist. What the fuck? Or we spend so much time with the villain, they might as well be the protagonist. Now, I could I'm gonna give an example, but it's not from a published book, but I was working with a friend and she had both the protagonist and the villain to take care of. And she clearly cared about the villain more than the protagonist, and it showed. Because the protagonist was so boring, but the villain was amazing. But she took over, she might as well have been the protagonist, and that drives me nuts. Following that vein, instead of having a villain that's too important, too unimportant, if the villain doesn't affect the plot in a significant way, or does anything, or really affects the hero, why the fuck are they there? Or you have like 5 villains and 4 of them do shit, and the 5th one's just like, hi guys, my name's Bob, and I'm here. It's like, why the fuck? Write him out. No. Don't have Bob in there. Fuck Bob. He's a stupid villain. Cut him out. The next thing that you shouldn't do is make your villain cartoonishly ugly. I mean, I like villains who are hot, because, you know, sometimes I look at the villain like, I'd tap that, so I don't know what the problem is here. But please don't make them cartoonishly ugly. It's kind of like, I know this is, like, if you take Oogie Boogie for A Night Before Christmas, in his own world, he makes sense. Put him in, like, the place of like any Disney villain, any other Disney villain, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, who the fuck would trust him? That's how I feel with a lot of like lower grade animations where they make the villain just ugly as fuck. Like, they're just a rat taking human shape, and people are like, yeah, I'll trust him. It's like, why? What makes him trustworthy? Absolutely fucking nothing. And lastly, don't use cliches. I mean, this is a normal one. Unless you subvert the cliches, they're just that. Cliches. Like, come on. And they're boring. Guys, come on. They're so boring. How many times have you seen a villain with an accent? Usually Russian or German. How many times have you seen them smoke or eat an apple, for Christ's sake? How many times is it like, I'm a kidnapper and I'm like disfigured, man? It's like, no, guys, come on. This is so fucking boring. Please do another one. Also, fun fact, as I was looking up examples for this, I forgot to mention it, and that's on me. Don't make your villain the only person of fucking color.
Stop it. Get some help.
Fucking dicks. Ah. Now, of course, now that we finished the section of what they shouldn't be, let's talk about what they should have. Or, can have. You don't have all of this, but, majority rules. Let's go with that. So the first thing is that make sure that the villain and the hero, because those are the terms I'm going with now, because fuck saying protagonist, is that they should have like a strong link. Whether that be like a personal connection, or the fact that, the hero is the one person that stands in the villain's way. That's cool. There's so many examples of having that personal link, even if they don't know each other. I think it's a lot more fun if they do know each other. I just finished Vengeful by V.E. Schwab, and the characters were like best friends, and now they're against each other. It was amazing. Go read that book. Fantastic. The next thing is have the villain either impact or mirror the hero's development. The best example I can give of this is She-Ra, the latest redone of it. I can't think of words. But regardless, the hero and the villain mirror each other wonderfully. They impact each other's development multiple times throughout the story, and it is just a joy to unfold because you honestly have no idea where it's going to go next. I highly recommend it if you need an example for this. The next thing that your villain should do is have a clear morality. And this is like, kind of know where they draw the line. Will they kill orphans? Will they kill children? Because not all orphans are kids. But will they kill like adults? Will they kill it all? Are they like Two-Face? Will they flip a coin? Is it up to chance? And they stick by it. Like if they're like, it's the outcome I don't like, but it's what I stick to. Write them down and make sure that they don't fall back on it. If they say I'm gonna do this, make sure they do it. Or if they say I'm not gonna do it, make sure they don't do it. Just a, fun fact. The next thing your villain should have, and I think this is just super important, is that they need a compelling backstory. This is explaining why they are the way that they are. This is their psychology. This is the shit I am so into. You can ask Haley. I am all about that. So you have to have that, like, that meat on that bone of, like, why are they the way they are? Obviously, no one just came out evil. Or if they did, how did they fucking deal with that? Because psychopaths are a thing. But still, you have to go into that. You have to figure out what that is. The next thing is that the villain should be on par or better than your hero. And I mean that in, like, they have to be stronger socially if that's the conflict. Intelligence-wise, and of course, physicality is typically what we see. But how, I think it's more fun if it's, like, they don't know who's better. And they're constantly, like, jabbing blows at each other, trying to figure out how one's better than the other. And it's until the end that the hero kind of figures out the other person's flaws. And they're like, I'm going to use their weaknesses against them. And that's makes them seem more intelligent, no matter what those, like, the strength is. So maybe do that. Of course, following that up, make sure, because this is also super important, make sure they actually do evil fucking acts. This sounds dumb. I wish it was like a no-brainer. But for some reason, some villains either never do or they balk away from, like, they're like, oh no, I can't do the evilness for whatever fucking reason. I don't know. I don't get it. Whatever, I guess. But yeah, make sure they do evil shit if they're a villain. If that's their thing. I don't know. Mother Gothel wouldn't be as fun if she never fucking abused Rapunzel. Just saying. Even though it's a shitty thing to say. Something I didn't think I was gonna say today, but here we are. Also, since we're on Disney, make sure your villains are fun! I like fun villains. I think of, oh crap, I'm gonna forget his name. But the villain from The Princess and the Frog. I can't think of his name, and I'm dying. But he was just such a fun villain. The way he danced, the way he talked, the way he manipulated people to get what he wanted. Oh, he was fun. And he made it memorable to me. So yeah, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, make sure they're kind of fun. Even Joffrey was fucking fun just to see how horrible he'd be. I'm just saying. Now, of course, I'm not gonna leave you empty-handed, because when do I ever do that? Cue flashbacks of me letting you guys down. We're gonna have some tips on how to make your villain one of the greats. Or at least good, because honestly, that's what I shoot for. Now, first tip is, of course, put yourself in their shoes. Walk a mile in them. Ruminate in them. I don't know. Find a way to put yourself in their perspective. How are they more sympathetic? How do they see the world? How has their backstory affected them? And try to see it that way to make them more compelling. Of course, having a badass introduction always helps. I always like to think of like Megamind, with how like, I know he wasn't the villain, but the world saw him as a villain. He was so flashy and cool. He knew how to make an entrance. So if your villain, kind of like the Joker, if he makes it like a cool introduction, and like that's gonna stick, people are gonna fear when he comes back, or she, whatever, or they, I don't know. The next thing that you could do, but be careful with it, is you could choose a real life model. Obviously, I don't mean like take that person and put it in your book, because that might be, depending on who you pick, a little obvious. But what you could do is draw their traits of like just their personality, maybe like the ideas of why they did what they did to make your villain, because obviously you don't want to take another person's, things. And this could be obviously from, let's be real, the dictators we're all thinking of, or it could be that jerk boss, an abuser in your life, or a toxic person in your life. I am so sorry if you've been abused. But though you could take those traits and put them into your villain, and you can control like the levels of them to make something entirely new. The next thing you can do is use the theme to influence their traits. And this could be like, obviously, if you have themes of like death or trauma. Back to, well, actually no, I was gonna mention a book, but that might be a spoiler, so I'm not gonna say it. But it also could be like, if you're trying to say that a corporation is evil, make a person who embodies those kind of traits. Or as Tolkien did, industrialization. He hated it, obviously, but his villains loved it. For obviously bad reasons, but they did. And so that's why they acted the way they did. It all helped their motivation, but it helped force their acts. So maybe try that. The next thing is less of a tip and more of like an observation, but I tend to see that villains are either charismatic or scary. Like on the scary side, I mean, these are just, the ones that stick out to me is like Hannibal Lecter in like the movies, horrifying. Oh god, there's so many scary ones. Most like Lady Tremaine, she terrifies me. Cersei Lannister terrifies me. They're horror, like they scare me to the bone, even though they're not physically scary. But for like the charismatic ones, I like to think of Dr. Facilier, now that I remember his fucking name. He's very charismatic, he's very manipulative, because he doesn't seem that like, scary. He's like, I'm just like a Louisiana man, it's fine. And Loki, now that I remember, Loki's very charismatic. He was also very sexy, but he's also very charismatic. Let's be real, I couldn't get through without mentioning he's hot. But, try to see which one you want your character to be. Which one makes sense to them. Are they being more manipulative in that, like, they're, don't cross me, like, scary? Or manipulative, because let's be real, all villains are manipulative. To the point where it's like, no, trust me, I'm so trustworthy. Which one are they? I mean, you could do both, but be careful. Because that's more Joker with the unpredictability, but, again, be careful. The next thing that I got, more observation than a tip, but you still could do it, but carefully. The protagonist can be the villain. And the prime example that I've been sitting on this whole video is Light from Death Note. Where, let's be real, he's the villain, especially toward the end when he gets a god complex, and L in any other story would be the hero. He's trying to catch the killer, solve the crime, woo. But in this, we see it through Light's eyes. So those are fascinating, but again, dangerous. Just be careful when you're writing them to make sure that your villain he's not too evil, but like still redeeming, if that makes any sense. And the last tip I have for you is to remember that a villain is a hero in their own story. They think, like Light, that they are doing the right thing, the necessary thing. Like Thanos, he's doing stuff to balance out the universe. It's what's needed because the people before him didn't do what was necessary. So try to think of it as that way. And that's all I have for you today. Please tell me in the comments down below, who is your favorite villain and why? Is it because they're charismatic? Are they sexy? Are they just fucking hot? I mean, let's be real, one of my favorite villains is Jareth in the Labyrinth because he is sexy as fuck. And please, you can always tell me on Twitter at writing_addicts or on Facebook at facebook.com/writingaddicts. Or if you're really got, the new stuff, go on our Instagram because that's new, and go on to writing.addicts to see us there. And, please hit that subscribe button while you're here, that like button, that notification bell so YouTube actually tells you when we have videos. And I will, of course, see you all next time. Bye, lovelies!
Happy Halloween!
Woo!